Guild Wars, Sea of Sorrows. Chapter 33. The crew pulled with all their might, hauling the ropes so fiercely that their hands left bloodstains on the fibers. The Indomitable scraped against the Nomad 2's side, her hull leaving stripes of black mold along the Nomad 2's weathered boards. Creatures crawled across the deck, rotting hands tearing at any sailors they could find. Red water drenched the deck as blood and salt mixed beneath churning boots. The Indomitable's canvases hung in ruined tatters from her masts, and the wind swelled only the clipper's sails. The Nomad 2's guns continued to tear at the Indomitable's rigging, shredding the rotting fabric from her yardarms. On the deck, Chernok slashed at Grim again and again with her taloned claws. The Norn was berserk with rage. He punched the white directly in her face, and bones cracked beneath leathery skin as he forced her to retreat across the deck. She was quick, though, and clever, leaping to attack at any opportunity, her claws slashing open the skin of his arms and raking across the pugilist's chest. Grim grabbed Chernok by the neck and snapped it roughly, and at last, the white fell limp. Disgusted, Grim hurled the creature away and raced toward Braun. Chernok landed with a thump on the deck. Within moments, her head twisted back around, the bones in her neck crackling loudly. Her flesh reweaving itself as the creature struggled to heal the wounds she had been dealt. She was down, but not yet out. Across the deck, Grim fell to his knees, hands reaching to clasp his brother's shoulders. He lifted his brother from the floor, tipping Braun backward onto his knees. "You'll be fine, old cuss," Grim said firmly, denying any other possible outcome. Braun writhed in his arms, dark steam issuing from the gunshot wound in his chest. His mouth fell open, and more smoke wafted from his throat and poured from the Norn's nostrils. He made a low, guttural sound deep within his chest. Braun, Grim let go, drawing his hands back. His arms were bloody from Chernok's aggressive strikes, and his long beard was matted with salt foam. "Braun, can you hear me?" His brother's head tipped forward awkwardly, and his eyes closed. Grim wept openly, cradling his brother's body to his chest. My brother, he murmured in grief and pain. But as it had been in the fight with Chernok, death was not the end of Braun's Vard. His body twitched in his brother's hands, startling Grim, who stared down at the bearded Norn in renewed hope. "Braun?" he asked softly, touching the side of his brother's face. The body in Grim's arms went stiff with a sudden rigor mortis, the limbs twitching and spasming as muscles contracted and released beneath the surface of the Norn's skin. Slowly, a hideous smile spread beneath Braun's mustache, a smile that was not his own. The swordsman's eyes snapped open, a solid, inky black, and his hand lifted to clench tightly around his brother's throat. "Brother!" Grim choked out, horrified. The thing that had been Braun gave a sick-sounding laugh. "No more." Near the gunwale, Kobaya raised his sword and focused on Captain Whiting, refusing to allow the green pinpricks of light within the monster's skull to unnerve him. "I outrank you, Captain," Kobaya snarled. "You can swab your own decks." Dawn's rays shone palely from the bone of Whiting's skull, and the exposed bone beneath his torn frock coat. "Bosun Vost," the undead captain said with a smile. "Give him 39 lashes as penance for his insolence." A scuttling creature rose from the masses aboard the Indomitable. Its hands from the wrists down had been replaced with leathery tentacles, not suckered like an octopus's, but serrated like the teeth of a shark. His white hair hung in torn lumps from parchment-like skin, and beneath the skin, the muscles that shifted the creature's frame were a moldy shade of bluish white. "Aye, sir," it rasped in a voice like sandpaper. "I'll teach the boy a lesson, all right." "Kobaya!" Isaye screamed from the fore of the ship. Her sword swung free of one of the Indomitable's undead sailors, tearing through its sternum. She placed her foot on the writhing corpse's chest and pushed, heaving the body overboard. Kobaya struggled to keep down his bile, as Vost crawled over the gunwale and onto the Nomad 2's deck. "I'm a bit busy," I say. Vost's arms lashed out, the tentacles slashing across Kobaya's chest. Although he jumped back, the blow tore open his shirt, and where the undead bosun's tentacles touched his skin, boils rose as if he'd been splashed with acid. It scalded fiercely, burning through his skin with incredible pain. Furthermore, the knife wound on his side had begun to bleed again, spotting the bandages across his ribcage with scarlet. This fight was not going well. Out on the open sea, the Creadan vessels were falling, one by one, to the dead ships. The 2 scarlet-sailed Exabecs led the charge, their magic lashing out against the living fleet. As Kobaya watched, the red sails of one ship shivered and burst into flame, heat waves rippling out toward a Creadan galleon. The Creadan ship caught fire as the surge of heat passed, its hull spontaneously bursting into flame. He could hear the distant shouts of the sailors as they hurried to put out the fire with the pumps before it could spread, and saw them targeted by 100 arrows launched from the Exabec's wide deck. Though the Orion ships were less advanced than the Indomitable, their magic made them even more dangerous. Bronzevard surged to his feet, lifting his brother by the neck. His black eyes blazed in sharp contrast to the deathly pallor of his skin. "Don't worry, Grim," he snarled. "You'll join me in the service of the dragon, and we will again fight as one. We will serve Zhaitan forever." In panic and fear, Grim raised his hands above his shoulders, bringing them down in forceful chops onto his brother's collarbone. Once, twice, 3 times, he struck to either side of Bron's neck. On the 3rd blow, the bone cracked, and Bron's hands loosened around Grim's throat. With a lurch, Grim raised his feet to Bron's chest and kicked, separating the 2 with a massive shove. Grim fell to the deck, and Bron staggered back. Rolling to his side, Grim roared to his brother, "Bron! Fight it!" "No, my brother." Bron reached for his bloodied sword. Shaking the stain from its blade, he lifted the weapon and strode toward Grim. "You cannot fight the inevitable. I feel it in my bones, in my blood. Zhaitan's will is my will. His strength is my strength." Bron's black eyes flashed. "The world will be reborn by the dragon's will. Death is the beginning." He swung the greatsword in a mighty arc, and Grim was forced to roll aside. As the blade completed its forward sweep, Grim gathered himself, lunging to his feet in the wake of his brother's sword. "No," Grim raged. "You are not my brother." In fury, Grim lifted his hands, screaming a prayer to the spirits of the wild as tears welled in his eyes. "Bear, give me strength. Snow leopard, lend me speed. Raven, let my hands be your talons." As he shouted the words, his flesh began to transform, his body shifting, growing larger. "Ever-running wolf, I am your son. Let me die if I must, but I cannot abandon my brother to this fate. Spirits, be with me." The last words were an almost inhuman roar. Grim's body had swelled to nearly twice its original size, standing 8 feet high with massive shoulders. Silvery claws erupted from his overlong fingers, and cold starlight shone in his eyes. Part man, part wolf, Grim raised his muzzle in a woeful howl. Then, with a surge of motion, he charged toward his undead brother once more, pitting claw and savagery against steel. 2 smaller Orion ships cut across the Nomad 2's wake, guns blazing. They were chasing a swift little ketch flying the colors of Port Noble, her crew struggling desperately to keep up their speed. As the ketch tacked back and forth, the dead ships tried to follow. But their sails grew tangled in the constant shift of rigging and line. Foundering, They blasted their deck guns in a desperate attempt to slow their opponent, but the ketch spun on a lofty roll of wave and danced back toward them, evading their fire. She took one out with a full broadside of her 9-pound guns, the cannons rocking back on their braces. Yet for every victory, there were multiple defeats. One of the dead ships rammed the hull of a wide-berthed Cretan clipper, throwing lines over her side as the Cretans fired their guns, trying to ward off the Orions. Chunks of the dead ship's wooden frame blew off with each assault, but beneath the hull was a structure of bone and muscle, like a living underbelly that absorbed the shots from the Cretan guns. Although the wood peeled like flesh, the underside remained sturdy, and the brave little clipper could not be rid of her. Strange, meaty tentacles, like mobile intestines, lashed up from clefts between the bony ridges and attached themselves to the deck of the clipper. The suckers on the flabby lengths clung to every inch of wood as the tentacles contracted, crushing the ship with hideous strength. In the harbor, the Exebecs were making thin lines toward the Indomitable, apparently aware of the flagship's distress. With sails of flame, they cut through the billowing waves, leaving a trail of white foam and black ash behind them. "Kobaya," I yelled. She pointed with the blade of her cutlass. "Something's under the water." Past the Indomitable, a shadow moved beneath the waves. At first, Kobaya dismissed it, thinking it nothing more than the monstrosities he'd already seen, the kind that clawed their way up the Nomad 2's hull, or walked on the sandy beaches beneath the white foamed waves. But this one was different. It wasn't just the sheer size, though large. The mass could have been made up of sunken ships or a crowd of undead moving across the ocean floor. But this one moved in a way that was unlike the others. It was no ship, no swimming human or near-human form. The purplish shadow moved like an eel, undulating and twisting in the current that pulled the Nomad 2 toward the island in the bay. As it rose toward the surface, the long shape took form flippers, each as large as a small ketch, a tail as flat and massive as the deck of one of the Cretan galleons. The head that broke the waterline was triangular and long, with sleek rivulets of hardened flesh to shunt the water from the creature's black, beady eyes. Its mouth was wide and long, like a shark's, and rows of teeth, each the size of a man, slit the water into blood-stained froth. Kobaya stumbled as the ship tilted, water rushing before the monster-like innocence before an invading tide. He knew that creature. It was the maw. "Eyes to port. Watch for a ramming blow from beneath us," Kobaya yelled in warning. The Leviathan rose farther, a bellow trumpeting from its rotting jaw. Once its leap lifted most of the monster's body above the water, Kobaya could see it more clearly, and it was not entirely as he remembered. The monster was as dead as the ships of ore, its black flesh rotted and fouled by disease. Barnacles clung to the creature's fins, and putrid green spittle blew from its thick, fleshy lip. The thrashing tail slashed through the current. Water rushed through holes in the creature's flesh, revealing bones etched with salt pitting and blood-sucking remoras, the size of a lifeboat writhing in the behemoth's innards. A long, pale scar in the creature's cheek marked an old wound where a cannonball had once rent a bloody hole in sensitive flesh. "The rule of the living has ended," Captain Whiting said mockingly. "This is the time of the Elder Dragons. Thus begins the time of Zhaitan and of Or. The day of their ultimate victory is close." "Close," Kobaya said through gritted teeth. "But not today." He spun to look toward the city and saw the fort at Claw Island growing nearer and nearer still. Kobaya could see the Lion Guard manning its walls, turning their cannons toward the sea battle. The flag of Lion's Arch whipped in the wind above its highest tower, and the sandy beach outside the wall held 2 trebuchets standing ready with balls of flaming pitch. "We're here," he breathed, a smile spreading across his features. "We made it." As if in answer, the fortress opened fire.